from 4:08 until 4:50. We are going to have a work session. We're going to abruptly cut off at 4:50, whether we're finished or not, just mid-sentence. The work session is going to be primarily Buford going through with the technical aspects of the proposed Greeno Road overlay for the commission members and questions for the members to ask, and then we'll have a 10-minute break. That'll be the first item on our agenda, will be the overlay. So at that point, we'll open everything up for public participation and start recording at that point. One thing to remember about this overlay district is we're not taking anything or any rights away from anybody. We're simply adding rights. As long as I've been on this board, the big question has always been of what to do with Greeno Road. People don't want it to look like Airport Boulevard or Highway 59 in Foley. But on the other hand, people also say it's not suitable to live on with single-family residences with 132-foot wide lots facing on Greeno Road. So we're here now trying to find a compromise where we can add some rights and some commercial uses for these properties on Greeno Road, but on the other hand, not detract and have Greeno Road look like Airport Boulevard. That is the goal that we are trying to achieve here. Again, we're not trying to take any rights away from any property owners. We're trying to add rights to the property owners without making a hideous eyesore and a traffic jam issue that we have in places like Airport Boulevard or Highway 59 or even Hamburger Alley just up the road in Foley. So without further ado, I will turn the meeting over to Buford.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Thank everyone for attending this afternoon. And as the Chairman stated, this is the work session, and we will have a period of public participation once we open the regular meeting of the Planning Commission at 5 p.m. So this is an opportunity to go through the technical details between staff and the Planning Commission, and then allow the public to view this meeting that can prepare them for questions or statements they may have during the regular meeting. So, Chairman, Commissioners, in your slideshow, what you're seeing and what we're seeing on the various screens, and also, Chairman, Commissioners, we're going to try something new today. This is just an experiment of using an additional larger screen that's a bit easier to see. This is something we wanted to try for today's meeting. So, the slide we're beginning with right now, discussing the GRC overlay, is about 20 slides into the slideshow that we'll show during the regular meeting, and also what was published online prior to this meeting. So I figured this was a good starting point to begin, then we'll get into the technical details. So first of all, one of the questions, and where we are right now in the slideshow is the FAQs, frequently asked questions. Beginning, let's lead off with this. So when would an affected property owner receive a letter in the mail about the GRC? And so that would occur prior to a meeting at which action by the Planning Commission, a vote, is requested. All property owners affected by the GRC will receive a written notice in the mail. We are not asking action by the Planning Commission today. This is an opportunity for public engagement and to present the GRC to the public yet again. So, two questions. In a nutshell, what does the GRC restrict? And as we note there, the drive-through lanes, with the exception of the Southern Edge District, backlit or illuminated plastic signs, neon signs, video boards, blank featureless walls, flat roofs without parapets or cornices, unscreened rooftop equipment, and certain uses, which we'll explain when we get into the districts. So, in a nutshell, what does the GRC require or encourage? And just read it off the screen. Enhanced landscaping, which you'll see in the illustrations coming up, a build-to line, parking in the rear of buildings, mandatory site plan review, mandatory landscape review, four-sided architecture, and encourages retrofit of older shopping centers. So, Chairman, Commissioners, this next slide this excerpt is a text excerpt right out of the proposed intent and description of the GRC. And what I'll illuminate here, this gives a narrative description of where it is and what it is. You'll have a map in a slide we'll get to in a moment. What I would note here is the area marked in yellow. Some properties within the geographic area of the GRC are not now within the corporate limits, and thus this ordinance does not apply to such properties. However, land subsequently annexed into the city of Fairhope, located within the GRC, would be automatically included within GRC. So if it's not in the city limits right now, it's not affected. It would be if it became annexed. So to summarize that also, notice the orange balloon. If a piece of property is crossed by the 400-foot line, that entire property is in the GRC. So let's describe the districts. And so, Commissioners, you probably all noticed the map out in the front in the lobby of the Civic Center. That has been on display for about 2 weeks in the front lobby of City Hall. We also have an identical copy in the front lobby of the Public Works and Utilities Building. So let's just go through the list of districts very quickly. The Northern Edge District, which would be from Dale Drive to South Drive, which is the southern border of Daphne down to South Drive, and that's roughly the northern edge of Rock Creek. Then you have the North Village Center near Parker Road, would be from South Drive to State Highway 104. The Gateway District from State Highway 104 to Edwards Avenue. The Fairhope Avenue Village Center, that would be Edwards to Morphy, and then Morphy Avenue to Old Battles Road would be your Southern Edge District. I'll give you a little bit of description on why those names are the way they are, where that nomenclature comes from. Before we go through the 5 districts in detail, let's talk about requirements for all districts. So this is the applicability section of the proposed ordinance amendment. Section applies to all new construction, demolition, Class 3 renovations, sidewalks, uses, private improvements, landscape alterations of any kind within the GRC overlay. Note the first sentence in yellow. Provided, however, this section shall not apply to properties zoned RA, R1, R2, or R3, your single-family zoning districts. Another thing and we have some legalese in there to explain applicability. Also call your attention to the yellow line below. Non-conforming uses, structures, lots, and other nonconformities existing within the GRC at the time of establishment shall be governed by Article 7 nonconformities. So what we're identifying there, Chairman Commissioners, we're not changing and not proposing changes to the nonconformity section of the zoning ordinance. This is a proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance. If someone believes they have a request for a variance or a hardship or an administrative appeal, it would apply in the GRC like it would in any other zoning district, and the ability to go and petition the Board of Adjustments remains. So, to clarify Use Table 3-1. So, GRC shall continue to apply. The underlying zoning districts applicable to a particular property within the GRC shall continue to apply, subject to the additional provisions within the GRC. Use Table 3-1 still remains. So, Commissioners, some small text right here, and I'll just summarize. Your backlit and illuminated plastic signs would be prohibited. This would apply to all districts. Now, you notice the orange balloons. Cross-referencing pages 18, 19, 23, and 31 from the Visual Preference Survey. That's where this comes from. It's from the results of the Visual Preference Survey. You'll also notice the section on four-sided architecture. So therefore, blank featureless walls are prohibited, and there are some glazing requirements in there. This is especially for anything that would front upon Greeno. We did not reinvent the wheel, Commissioners. If you'll notice in the middle orange balloon, this requirement also exists, and you see in another section of the zoning ordinance for NVC and CVC districts. No one has built an NVC or a CVC district, but again, we didn't reinvent the wheel. That exists in the zoning ordinance right now. Also, you notice the pitch of the roofs between 6-on-12 and 12-on-12, again, borrowed from another section of the zoning ordinance. And then we talk about the mandatory site plan review and also the landscape plan. This makes it mandatory that new construction of the various applicability we talked about earlier would be required within the GRC. So we'll go through the districts one by one and show the illustrations for each district. So we'll begin with the Northern Edge District. Commissioners, you're probably wondering, where does the term edge come from? And you'll notice I have the note there in gray, page 36 from the comprehensive plan. Edges, Greeno Road commercialization must have a clear edge where it stops from where it begins. So that nomenclature is derived from comprehensive plan. Now, you'll notice in the illustration there, you have a cross-section elevation on the left, and then you have a plan view on the right. In this particular area, you'll notice the width, you notice the edge of right-of-way, the width of the required landscape buffer, showing existing streetscapes, 10-foot wide sidewalk, and then the build to line is shown. Now, this prohibits drive-throughs for all uses. Standalone ice machines, ATMs, and car washes would be prohibited. A hotel or motel will be limited to 30 rooms. Bed and breakfast would be allowable. Maximum of 12 rooms must be owner occupied and operated. Now, the automobile service stations, convenience stores, automobile repair facilities are an allowable use. We do have some enhancements to the regular sections of the zoning ordinance for them to encourage parking in the rear, fuel pumps in the rear, that sort of thing. We'll explain that in a future slide. So the North Village Center District. Now the requirement here is going to be a mirror of also the Fairhope Avenue Village Center District. Now you notice here, more automobile oriented, higher density. So you'll notice the landscape buffer is a bit more narrow. The sidewalk width, the on-property sidewalk is wider. You can see the build to line, the edge of right-of-way. You see that marked on both the cross-section as well as the plan view. Again, the drive-throughs are prohibited. The ATMs, car washes, standalone ice machines. This would prohibit quick-serve restaurants, which are restaurants with no table service or takeout only or pickup meals only or food trucks. The single-use buildings are prohibited with the exception of hotels, motels. Automobile repair, automobile service stations, convenience stores will be prohibited in this district. And then the ground floor retail, commercial restaurants, and mixed-use facilities would be limited to 8,000 square feet. And then the grocery, general merchandise, shopping center is limited to 8,000 square feet per owner or tenant. So just a quick excerpt from the comprehensive plan to show where this North Village Center is contemplated. And so just to show that this is supported by the comprehensive plan. So we want to take a quick excerpt from the visual preference survey. This was question 21. Would you like to see this type of development happen in a village center? And so you see the photo right there from the Fairhope Avenue Village from the visual preference survey. And this was the results of that survey from the VPS. So it was considerably 86.62% positive. Now, would you like to see this type of development happen in a village center? Again, this is from the visual preference survey, question 22. And so that was pretty overwhelmingly negative. You notice the no answer is almost 90%. So let's talk about the Gateway District. For the sake of space, we'll have its own slide. Again, a wider landscape buffer, a little bit more narrow sidewalk. You see the edge of right-of-way marked right there. And we note the right-of-way widths may vary. So the drive-throughs prohibited for all uses. Standalone ice machines, ATMs, and car washes will be prohibited. Your quick-serve restaurants will be a prohibited use like we've talked about earlier. Similar to the other districts, the automobile repair convenience stores would be restricted. You'll notice the ground floor retail, the grocery, similar to the prior slide, the requirements to the 8,000 square feet. You'll notice the bed and breakfast here is limited to no more than 6 rooms, but must be owner occupied and operated. 2-family and townhouses developed. It needs to be at least 2 stories. And so what we'll see on the next slide, Commissioners, I'll give you an example of how we would evaluate a proposed development using the Gateway District. And we can come back to this to answer questions in a little bit greater detail. But what we show here is this is a development that has not been built. This is just an example if this were to occur on Greeno Road. And so this particular one, you see the different buildings right there. If this were in the Gateway District, the 40-foot landscape buffer shown here would reduce to 20 feet. You would have parking in the rear. You would have a build-to line behind an on-property sidewalk behind a landscape buffer. And if there was any incidental side parking because of the size of the buildings and the side of the lot, that would still fall behind the landscape buffer because the landscape ordinance 1444 would still apply. So jumping back to the visual preference survey again, question 36, would you prefer this type of development along Greeno Road or Highway 181? So again, you notice here, in this photo, you see the really wide landscape buffer, And this one has a little bit wider sidewalk than shown in our example, but it's a good example. And you can see from the visual preference survey, it had a very, very positive response of more than 83%. So the Fairhope Avenue Village Center, this Village Center district, again, mirrors that of the North Village Center around Parker Road, around the public store. It mirrors that same requirements. Okay, and then our final district would be the Southern Edge District. And you notice similar to the Northern Edge District as far as the layout of your cross-section view and of your plan view. And again, we reference back to comprehensive plan requiring edges. Now, single drive-through lanes are allowable at the rear of the principal structure. We've made some enhanced drive-through. We've enhanced and created some requirements for drive-throughs that are proposed for Article 3, Section D11. But your standalone ice machines and ATMs would still be prohibited. The hotel motel will be limited to 30 rooms. Your bed and breakfast would be allowable, maximum of 12 rooms. And again, in this district, your automobile service station, convenience stores, your car wash facilities, automobile repair facilities, these are allowable in this district. This is a more automobile-oriented district from Morphe South. And again, we have some enhancements to the zoning ordinance that we are asking the Planning Commission to consider. We'll explain that on a future slide. So what I'd like to do here, Commissioners, is just make a couple closing remarks. And I'm going to have to lean over to read this to you, so if you'll forgive me for that. This page you see on the far right, this is pulled right out of the comprehensive plan. And so you notice the two orange balloons. And so, for example, since the citizens desire that Greeno Road not turn into another example of strip development, Fairhope must continue to develop and utilize its strict sign ordinances under underlying requirements. And you'll notice right there, commercial land uses along Greeno Road are likely to depend on high traffic counts and are likely to mimic the uses seen on other major corridors throughout South Alabama. The citizens desire that Greeno Road not turn into another bad example of strip development. And then you'll also notice under design guidelines, consider the creation of design guidelines for commercial development along Greeno Road that addresses items such as parking placement on site, build two lines, etc. So again, this endeavor is a continued implementation of the comprehensive plan. So, Commissioners, what we'll do here is go through the zoning ordinance revisions. And let me make a statement here that in order to support the Greeno Road corridor overlay, we discovered that there are areas in the zoning ordinance itself that would also it would be advantageous to update and modernize parts of the zoning ordinance, not just to support the GRC, but just to support the city in general. So we'll go through that here. So we'll start with service stations, convenience stores, car washes, and automobile repair. So going back to the visual preference survey, what do you like about the image below? And the overwhelming answer, more than 90%, was none of the above. So let's give an example of a possible new standard. And so this is a fuel station on Opelika Road in Auburn. And you'll notice that all of the fuel pumps are in the rear, behind the building. And here's another view of that. Here's another view of that same station. This is on the west side of Opelika Road. This is not far from where you break off of Gay Street to go north on Opelika Road. So the red text portion, and it's actually highlighted in gray in your packets, Commissioners. So here is a proposed revision to those requirements in the zoning ordinance for those types of uses. And so, for example, and we won't go through it line by line, Commissioners, but the orientation of the building, fuel pumps on the rear, trying to avoid light pollution, those are all enhancements to the zoning ordinance. So this would not only support the GRC, but would be for any area zoned where someone would wish to put one of these types of uses. Now, this is an abbreviated text here in your slideshow. The full text is in your packets and was also published online. So let's talk about Article 3 revisions. And this is drive-through lanes, use tables, accessory dwelling clarifications. So first of all, some housekeeping. We won't go into great detail about this, but we discovered a routine edit on our accessory structures and accessory dwelling units that we needed to retitle this just for some clarification. So this is a routine edit. It would be foolish not to take advantage of the opportunity to make amendments to the zoning ordinance if we didn't do some housekeeping, some routine housekeeping. This is a new section right here. This is a brand new section added to the zoning ordinance and governs all drive-through lanes and windows, both inside and outside the GRC. Drive-throughs are only permissible in the southern edge district of the GRC, but permissible in all other areas outside the GRC. And so, Commissioners, what this does is basically gives a standard for stacking lanes for the drive-throughs, and basically requires that the drive-through be a single drive-through on the rear or one side of the building. And so this is one, of course, we borrowed from another zoning ordinance from another city. And this, again, a routine amendment that really needed to go in the zoning ordinance. So let's talk about lighting. Commissioners, you'll see the paragraph above, you'll see Section 3, parking lot open area lighting. That was the entire lighting section in the zoning ordinance. You'll see the red text we have here, and that goes on for a couple pages, and it's a bit small here. We used Walton County, Florida's lighting ordinance as a model. Now, they have some coastal requirements due to sea turtle nesting, which is not necessarily applicable to Fairhope. But from a technical standpoint, to give you actual measurable requirements, we borrowed that and modified it to fit Fairhope. So this would apply in the zoning ordinance, whether or not it's in the GRC. But the intent here is we did hear some feedback from citizens. You've got to do something to make certain we don't have light pollution. And so the different shielding of the light fixtures is all noted here. And then some other housekeeping items, Commissioners. We did not have a definition for a car wash facility. So this adds one, both an automated and a manual car wash. Some housekeeping items, Commissioners. We discovered through practice that the clinic use needed some enhancements. We also discovered that we really needed a definition for heavy equipment. And if Commissioners have questions when we get through going through the slides, I can explain that. So again, some housekeeping issues to take advantage of since we're asking for an amendment to the zoning ordinance. So from a conclusion, just to conclude, Commissioners, the GRC is a continuing implementation of a comprehensive plan as well as response to the requests of Fairhope citizens expressed in the visual preference survey. Further, the GRC is the first step in possibly introducing a form-based zoning code to the city of Fairhope. And Commissioners, I'll take a few moments to thank some people who assisted. Mike Jeffries with putting together the maps, Jessica Walker and Paige Crawford with some of our Facebook postings, Emily for what she's about to do when we send out notices to all the affected property owners, in addition to what she does for us every day. We depend upon her quite a bit. And then also special thanks to Joe Lett. He's back in the control room making this meeting work. And we have a lot of things moving along right now. And Commissioners, when we begin the regular meeting, I'll formally introduce Hunter Simmons. He started last Monday, so we'll recognize him and welcome him when we start the regular meeting. So Commissioners, I think we have about 20 minutes to work with for answering questions, and what we can do is just go back, look at other slides, and answer your questions. And so I'm happy to do that beginning right now.
I was going to mention to you, Holly texted in and said she is stuck in traffic and will be here for the regular meeting, was hoping to get here for as much of this as possible.
Okay, understood. Understood, Chairman.
Stuck, not on Greeno Road traffic, but
okay.
Stuck in traffic.
Okay, so it's not Fairhope's fault, it's somewhere else.
It's not our fault.
It's not Fairhope's fault. So.
I have one question, a couple questions. On any request for an exception, you go to the Board of Adjustments. Since this is an overlay, this is more for Ken. Is that applicable, do you think, Ken, to go to the Board of Adjustment since this is an overlay, since they already have the rights of whatever the regular underlying zoning is? Okay. And in the North District, was I correct that there's just a 5-foot buffer there?
No, sir. So, great question. I have the slide up here. So you notice you have a 10-foot landscape buffer, and that is slightly more narrow than the right now. The landscape ordinance, the standalone landscape ordinance, requires a 20-foot landscape buffer along U.S. Highway 98. Looking at this and looking at the potential uses for that area, I think the 10-foot landscape buffer is probably more appropriate for this area. You'll widen that out once you get into the Gateway District.
Well, why is that? It seems like we're going backwards, and why do we need a 10-foot sidewalk? Is that for bikes?
Yes, sir. Well, and understand, too, is that it's possible that the uses that would go there could take more advantage of that wider sidewalk. And so you have more pedestrian space to maneuver around in that particular district.
And is the Southern District a 10-foot as well?
Yes, sir. So and we'll go to that slide. So I'm not telling you the non-truth. Yes, sir. So the profile and the plan view, they mirror Southern and Northern. The Southern differs by its different use restrictions.
And at one time, we had a big list of businesses allowable and not allowable. That's pretty much been taken out with the exception of car washes and those few caveats. So,
Chairman, that's a great question, and that in one of the earlier, in probably the first version that we brought toward the Planning Commission, I tried to introduce a column into the use table, and that was not an appropriate place for that because each use was going to differ slightly in each district. So as you know how the use table is labeled out, some places are dots. In some instances you have a dot for for allowable by right. You may have a circle, you may have an epsilon. So that was becoming very complicated, and I heard you loud and clear we needed to streamline and simplify. So we're letting this work just like all the other overlay districts, where you use the use table for the underlying zoning, you use the overlay for the additional allowances or additional restrictions.
I think making it more form-based like you've done makes a lot more sense.
Yes, sir. So, and that's, though this is not extremely sophisticated, but you notice the build-to line is the same. The build-to line, you have a defined build-to line, a defined sidewalk width, a defined landscape buffer. The right-of-way varies. So you could have different uses that could be beside one another depending upon their underlying zoning, but they would follow the same model, the same profile you see on the screens.
I really think we ought to look at some examples of 10 and 20 foot. All of us should look at examples of 10 and 20 foot buffers before we vote a recommendation to the city council, because does this go to city council? Yes, sir. This will go to city council. And Chairman, so a housekeeping measure, we can talk about this right now since we have a little bit of time, is that and so Chairman, I may ask you to confer with your fellow commissioners. The desire of staff would be to have this overlay on the agenda of the September 5th meeting for consideration by the Planning Commission. And so what we'd like to know as staff is that should we, after we get through with this meeting, should we proceed with that endeavor, or should we hear it again at this type of level? Because we could have another work session if we needed to. Our desire would be to consider it, or at least request consideration of it at September 5th meeting.
Why?
So that's a great question there too. The development moratorium expires October 1.
Stop. Would you explain that, please?
So thank you, Commissioner. And so this will take just a moment. Going back, in 2017, we had a development moratorium. Out of that development moratorium, there was a moratorium report. The moratorium report mentioned one of the endeavors identified was creation of the Greeno Road corridor overlay that we're discussing today. In addition to that, we also had to consider some zoning cases along Greeno Road. And some of the items we discussed with this commission, also with the city council, was conditions of approval when considering a zoning case that would limit drive-throughs, among other things. So you have that consideration going on at the same time, as well as about the same time we were considering some of those cases, you also had the visual preference survey in progress. And so between discussion among staff and the council was that it would be appropriate to have a development moratorium along Greeno Road in order to have the results of the visual preference survey, receive that feedback, analyze that feedback, and come up with the document that we're talking about today. Now, that development moratorium does expire October 1. However, commissioners, we've requested to speak to the city council at their August 12th meeting to advise them that depending upon the timing of this process, they may wish to consider extending that moratorium if they wish to allow additional time for this document to be considered.
Which is where I guess I was going with that.
Yes, sir.
I understand in the past that there have been a number of times that there have been issues like Greeno Road corridor that have come up. They've been batted around. They died for lack of whatever purpose. I think the Greeno Road corridor is a good thing. However, I've got about 5 or 6 items that I would like to discuss as it relates to this. And one of those had to do with the expiration of the moratorium, which would be on October 1st, and whether or not we had the capability of asking the city council to extend that moratorium for a period of time enough to allow us to proceed with this process in a timely manner, but at the same time to give the population, especially those that are going to be directly impacted, to give them the opportunity to sit down with us, not in a planning commission formal meeting whereby it's a public hearing, but in a public meeting, which my determination of what the difference is a public meeting is just that. Everybody gets notice. You want to have some input, come and sit down with us, and we could, if we got a lot of people that want to come, then fine. Let's go sit down in the auditorium, and we'll sit down and talk with them for a couple of hours. But to do that would be as much an opportunity to have transparency, because as it relates to Greeno Road, for 50 years now, there's been an issue about transparency. And I can speak to that firsthand, but I won't. And so a number of people that I do know have been in that same situation. Therefore, whatever we could do to allow them an opportunity, and not just to come to us for a few minutes in the meeting today, but at some point down the road to where we can get all of our ducks in a row in terms of what we want to do, and then allow them to come and sit down with us and then come to a public hearing, then I think we would be light years ahead in terms of the perception that the public will have about what we're doing and what the city council, Robert, will be doing when we get to that point. So that's kind of my thought in terms of maybe an extension, relatively short period of time, an extension on the moratorium to give us the time to do that. Now maybe nobody wants to sit down with the folks at a public meeting and have let them have whatever they want to say and present it to them. But I can tell you that there've been many things in the past 50 years that have gone down the tube where the public was not allowed to be involved in it.
And Chairman, I thank the Commissioner for his comments, and as we mentioned earlier, we will definitely, at staff level, we will definitely address the City Council about the moratorium, and we'll and fortunately we're addressing it early in the process to allow the time to prepare the necessary document to extend that moratorium if it's their pleasure. So we will definitely take that up with the city council a week from today. That will definitely occur. And then as far as additional meetings or an additional forum of some type for that, commissioners, we will investigate that at the staff level. We'll investigate that at the staff level and see what can be done.
Well, and that would be if planning commission so chooses to do that. That's just my opinion.
Yes, sir.
I'm fine either way. I mean, to me, I feel like I've done it numerous times over the past 20 years, You saw that one item, 1987, where they were doing, discussing the looks of Greeno Road and the attractiveness. And then we had the visual preference surveys. We've done, these town meetings that Emily can tell you about, where we've had 400 people in the meetings, and we've spent over an hour talking about Greeno Road specifically. And every time we've gotten close, something's gotten punted. And it's like, let's keep a moratorium on you people because we want to hear what you people have to say. And I mean, my point of this is we're not taking rights away from people. We're actually adding rights, and we're going to have time for people to speak and discuss. And at some point, you got to fire that shot over the bow. When you talk about your family and your family, my family wasn't consulted when the 70 acres we have on Scenic 98 became pretty much worthless because we don't allow family subdivisions anymore. And I mean, stuff like that happens. I don't think there was a conspiracy theory that, I didn't know when we didn't have meetings. That's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. But in this, I think through the years, everyone that says we need to allow commercial on Greeno, but we don't want it to look like Airport Boulevard. And we can certainly ask the people there exactly what they want. They might say, hey, let's just give us all strip shopping centers.
Well,
If you ask me what I wanted on my property, on my family's property down in Point Clear, I'd say I like 100 lots.
Yeah,
But
well,
that
I
wouldn't be
understand,
best
I
for
understand
the
what
most
you're saying.
people.
The point, though,
Well, what's best for the community and what's best for the most people, and, where are the professionals? And we've listened to professionals. We have had professionals come in a half dozen times in my tenure and discuss this exact issue. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I want to exclude anybody. I just don't want this thing to be put off again and again and again and again and again, as it has been since 1987.
all right, now let me give you a couple of examples of why I think it needs to be. Take a look down that line over there, and then look down this line over here and tell me how long this planning commission has been involved in the city of Fairhope's planning jurisdiction. Not very long, not many of them. You probably have got more planning commission experience than I do, and I've got a lot, but as it relates to most of the people here, they've not been involved in this kind of a process. Now, with that said, the other thing that's changed very radically is how we get the word out to the public. It used to be newspapers. Now, I don't know anybody who uses newspapers except for parakeet cages now. And it's just a matter of not having the opportunity. I don't do social media, so there's no way you could send me you get on social media and say, hey, all right, we're going to have a meeting day after tomorrow. I'd never see it. Well, I can envision there's a lot of people that way too. So what I suggested, and I had a conversation with Buford last week, and my feeling about it is, and Robert, I'd like to hear your feelings about this. But when you go to a meeting, you don't have to, this is not an official notification, but you could choose who you want to just send a letter from the city. I mean, a letter, it's 50 cents or 49 cents, heck, I don't know what a stamp is now, but it's a letter. It's a letter saying, we're gonna have a meeting on Tuesday night at 5 o'clock. Gonna be for 2 hours, come if you want to and have an input. You send it to everybody on the corridor and anybody in close proximity, and for the most part, what'd you say in one of those emails? There's 6,000 residences in Fairhope?
6,500.
Okay, that's $3,000. I mean, you'd alert everybody if you wanted to, but it's not a matter of dragging anchor. It's a matter of just being sure that we've got those people covered. And for that reason, I just don't see where we could.
Yeah, I'm not against the meeting. I'm just saying if we do it, let's do it.
Let's do it. Then,
let's schedule it. Let's keep the same September and let's do it. Or ask Emily to put it on October and.
Okay. So with that being said, commissioners, would the commission?
I mean, if everybody else feels that way, I'm ambivalent.
Yeah, what means of communication, I like the sound of transparency sounds good, but to Lee's point, this thing's been talked about for months and months, and we had the survey, and we did this, and we got 30 people here, and you probably have the same 30 people at the next meeting, so.
So,
Well, yeah.
so
The
Commissioners,
time has a lot to do with it.
I'll submit to Chairman and Commissioners the following. At the staff level, we proceed with scheduling a meeting, proceed with having this item on the September 5th meeting for consideration. Now, what that triggers is all affected property owners will be notified by mail.
Certified?
No, sir, not required in this instance. It'd be regular mail.
Okay.
It would be regular mail. Affected property owners, which, and so there was a question that I was asked a couple weeks ago that, do we know who all the people are? And yes, we do, because they're in the County Revenue Commission website. And they have a very simple and straightforward way of pulling that information out. And if we proceed with the September 5th meeting, certainly this commission could table it if they wished. But that would be the first meeting at which consideration was requested, and then the mailings would go out to all of the affected property owners. So we can proceed with that.
Could we discuss it in September, then have a September meeting, and then vote on it in October? Or vote on a recommendation in October?
You could continue to have just your regular open meetings like this and discuss it really for as long as you want. To Art's point about the public hearing, once you announce and open a public hearing, that's when some formal action required by the ordinance has to be taken. So as long as you don't open a public hearing at the next meeting, well, sure, you could decide to push that public hearing out to October if that was the commission's desire.
I'm fine with that. If we want to have a
Okay.
meeting, I'm fine. We could have it over at the library.
So Chairman, have a special meeting?
If that's what the commissioners want. I'm just ready to get this thing going one way or the other. If people show up, great. I mean, I'll love it. It's not, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to,
I understand.
I just want the can
And
to
it's
be
fine
kicked
if you don't
down.
agree, but that's.
No,
my-
my feeling is it seems like, we put all these notices out and nothing happens. Kind of like when the motel came to us, they had the meetings and notices went out and nothing happened. And then all of a sudden it got to city council and it got on the, email circuit and, all heck broke loose,
Well, that's because of the clock.
So
Yes, our
Commissioners,
wonderful clock.
I'll submit the following. And Commissioners, we're 3 minutes away from needing to take a break. At the staff level, let's investigate at the staff level, a special meeting for this item at which the Planning Commission, if they wished, could consider this item. Any issues with that, Mr. Watson, or?
Not if it's not advertised as one that was a public hearing that may be held.
Correct.
It has to be advertised.
Correct. It would, if we did have a special meeting, proper advertisement would occur. So that way the Planning Commission could take action if it was their pleasure.
We
All right,
could
let me-
do like we did with the, when we did the, what was it, the environmental LID techniques. We had a joint meeting between the city council and the planning and zoning commission over at the library, and we sent notice out, made sure all the engineers knew. And by the way, Emily, how many people on our email list that get our minutes and get our agenda?
Roughly about 350.
Okay. So Commissioners, staff, and Mr. Watson, we will vet that. We will vet that and advise the commission of dates and times for that. We'll vet that with Mr. Watson.
All right, another question. Specific items within the document that you provided to us for this review, how do you want us to handle those? Because we don't have enough time to go into that this afternoon. Do you want me to send you an email?
Absolutely.
With all of my issues associated with what you've got here?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Chairman, Commissioners, I would appreciate that very much. You are certainly welcome to email your marked up comments of the documents to me. Absolutely.
Sound good?
All right. So Chairman, Commissioners, we have about 2 minutes before we were going to take a break. Any additional questions before we
I just
break?
want to clarify, and I don't have a problem at all with another meeting that it hopefully will be more well-attended. Now, are you getting a lot of feedback from people as you have walked through these different overlay districts?
Commissioners,
this season?
some, but not a great deal. I think that now that the information is being more disseminated to the public, but altogether, I've had probably about a dozen inquiries from citizens outside of Planning Commission. I've probably had about a dozen inquiries from various citizens.
And I'm probably thinking more technically than what probably should be, but I'm assuming that one of the goals is to keep traffic on Greeno Road moving at a decent pace. And to me, that would require the cutouts to each driveway for each particular lot be somehow combined with connectivity of parking lots in the back. Are those types of provisions in this? Is that what we're trying to accomplish?
And Commissioners, that's a great question, and the answer is that maybe this is oversimplified, but this is how we address that. That's why this requires mandatory site plan review. And of course, all the other requirements of all the other various ordinances, including the subdivision regulations that would require a traffic study if applicable, all of those similar requirements still prevail and would be applicable to any developments. But ultimately, that's why we wanted to have mandatory site plan review, whether it otherwise triggered it. That way we'd have the opportunity to evaluate the development and what its impact would be, including curb cuts, because that's one of the criteria in a site plan review, the various traffic issues. Okay?
All right, we'll have a 10-minute break now. And
Thank you, Commissioners.
Start the regular meeting at 5 o'clock.